You're tuned into That's Life, where we celebrate the beauty, the chaos, and the wonder of real life. Sometimes it makes you laugh, sometimes it makes you cry, but it always makes you feel. Settle in. We're just getting started. On the edge of a vast field drowning in tall grass stood Eleanor. A light breeze gently touched her hair. The sun shone in the bottomless blue sky. Eleanor's gaze was fixed on the horizon line. There, barely discernible, a tiny speck appeared. It grew rapidly, taking on the outline of a human figure. Eleanor knew who it was and waited for her arrival. All her focus was on this coming encounter. The speck grew larger, and soon a running girl appeared before Eleanor. A smile lit up Eleanor's face. It was her, without a doubt. Long, light brown strands, laughing, light hazel eyes, a scattering of freckles, a slightly upturned nose, graceful, long arms and legs. The girl was strikingly similar to Eleanor, as if she were her exact copy. Next to her, Eleanor always felt extraordinarily happy and completely calm. They never exchanged words, just smiled at each other, intertwined fingers, laughed. Sometimes they ran somewhere into the distance together. Sometimes they simply sat on a large stone, contemplating the world around them. Sometimes their path lay along the surrounding trails. Eleanor clearly understood that these meetings took place in the realm of dreams. The friend appeared quite often, especially in earlier years, but not daily. Sometimes once a month, sometimes 3 times a week. Eleanor always awaited these nocturnal visits with a pounding heart. They differed from ordinary dreams. They were too tangible, too full of life, and never disappeared from memory after waking, as happened with other dreams. Eleanor couldn't remember when she first saw this girl. It seemed the friend from her dreams had always been there. At first, they were both very small children. The girls grew and changed together, in sync. Now they were 14 years old. No longer children, but not yet adults. Tall, thin, slightly awkward teenagers. Unfortunately, these dreams ended quickly and unexpectedly. Just now, a sharp sound pulled Eleanor out of the world of dreams, returning her to reality. She found herself on her bed in her own bedroom. Her cat, Filka, was sitting nearby. He clumsily jumped onto the bedside table and knocked over a glass of pencils. It was this crash that woke Eleanor. Well, now it's unknown when I'll have a dream with my girlfriend again, but definitely not today. Eleanor stroked the cat. He immediately began purring like a little tractor and settled comfortably on the nightstand. Now he would guard Eleanor's sleep until morning. The girl smiled and turned onto her other side. She needed to fall back asleep quickly. Tomorrow required an early start. Vacation was over. For a while longer, Eleanor lay immersed in thoughts about her amazing dreams. Previously, it seemed to her that everyone had such friends who appeared in dreams for years. This girl, whose name remained a mystery, had long become an integral part of Eleanor's life, something familiar, natural. But as she grew older, Eleanor realized that her friends had strange, fantastic, sometimes completely incoherent dreams. But the characters in them, as a rule, changed. No one else had a long-term friend from dreams like Eleanor did. "Oh, you're making it all up. You're just lying." "Chloe, Sharp-tongued, threw out dismissively. The other girls didn't argue, apparently not believing Eleanor either. Since then, the girl told no one about her dreams, not even her parents. And she understood for herself. Friends in dreams don't come to other people. What happened to her was a rarity, something others evidently found hard to believe. Parents. At the thought of them, Eleanor smiled. She was truly lucky with them. The girl grew up in an atmosphere of unconditional love and acceptance, and it had always been that way. Eleanor's mother and father were older than the parents of her peers. Only later did the girl realize that she was a late and very long-awaited child, and therefore immensely loved, even, to be honest, a little spoiled. Their family always had plenty, and Eleanor had everything she hinted at from the earliest years. Well, almost everything. Expensive toys, fancy clothes, trips to the circus and concerts, travel. When it was time to go to school, the girl's uniform was ordered from one of the best dressmakers in the city. The boring gray jumper required by the gymnasium charter was turned by the craftswoman into an elegant, graceful outfit. Her parents, without a doubt, spoiled their only daughter. Her grandparents, uncles, and aunts actively helped them in this. Eleanor was the only child in the whole large family, like in that famous story about Sidorovova. And she, like the hero of the verse, was loved and doted upon. But apparently, they still raised her correctly. Having everything, Eleanor never showed arrogance. She always had many friends, and her parents deliberately accustomed the girl to independence, and despite their boundless love, placed certain demands on Eleanor: good grades, participation in extra clubs and sections, obedience. And yet, mother and father never managed to fulfill Eleanor's main dream. From about the age of 4, the girl begged them to give her a little sister. She dreamed of another girl appearing in the family. She could play with her, talk to her, laugh together, just like with that friend from her dreams. Eleanor would braid her pigtails and share toys, teach her everything: reading, dressing beautifully, playing different games. They would walk together. Life would be much happier and more interesting to have such a dear, close person nearby. Eleanor would even agree to a brother, or even better, 2 little brothers or sisters at once. After all, people have twins. But her parents never fulfilled this dream. Becoming a little older, Eleanor understood. It was too late. Mother and father were close in age to her friend's grandparents, and they themselves had Eleanor at a quite mature age. Probably this didn't happen for no reason. Now, from films and TV shows, the girl knew that sometimes people simply couldn't have children. It seemed her parents had exactly that difficulty. Once they were lucky, they had a daughter. On that, fate's gifts apparently ran out. Eleanor simply adored her father and was very close to her mother. Complete understanding reigned in their family. The girl didn't remember ever being seriously punished. Usually, she shared all her secrets and worries with her parents. And yet, for some reason, she never once told them about the girl from her dreams. Perhaps she was afraid that mother and father would start convincing their daughter that it was all just a figment of her imagination, or worse, would get scared and take her to psychologists. No, let that girl remain Eleanor's cherished secret. Eleanor herself, having grown up a little, began to build various hypotheses regarding the girl from her dreams. Sometimes it seemed to her that the imaginary friend was her unrealized desire to have a sister. Sometimes she imagined that at night she met her inner self. It was no wonder the girl looked like her exact copy. And sometimes her imagination carried her away to parallel worlds, the transition between which occasionally opened in her dreams, and the girl was precisely from there, from another spacetime. In short, Eleanor had many theories and thoughts. Eleanor adjusted her blanket and hugged her soft bear tighter. Yes, at 14, she still liked to sleep with plush toys and wasn't at all embarrassed by it, unlike many of her peers. Eleanor was not in a hurry to grow up. She felt cozier, calmer, and more pleasant with soft toy animals. And now, Filka the cat was lying right next to her and purring. Pure idyll. Her parents were still awake. They often stayed up late, talking or watching a movie. They were such a close mother and father after all, and that was wonderful. Eleanor appreciated the peace and quiet that reigned in their home, because by the age of 14, she had already seen her friends' parents divorce and even witnessed unpleasant quarrels and squabbles between other people's fathers and mothers. Fortunately, in their cozy little nest, that had never happened. Now her parents were talking about something in low voices, music from some film played in the background. Eleanor involuntarily listened. Interesting, what were they talking about? Maybe they were making plans for the summer? The last quarter was starting, it would fly by quickly, and then the long-awaited long summer vacation. Surely they will fly to the sea or go somewhere else interesting. Most likely, her parents were deciding this very question right now. But deciphering the words, Eleanor understood they were talking about something else, not summer vacation. She's still just a child, Mother insisted. Judging by her tone, she was arguing with Father. An unheard of thing. Usually, there was always agreement between her parents. What kind of child? Father objected. She's a teenager now. Exactly. Even worse, teenagers are emotionally unstable, and growing up itself is not easy. There's no need for her to know anything now. But she'll find out anyway, sooner or later, Father persisted. They know where we live now. Do you think it will be better if Eleanor learns the truth from them? From complete strangers? That will scare her even more. We'll move, Mother countered. You're being transferred to Moscow, aren't you? We've been thinking about moving to the capital for a long time. This is the perfect time. Talk to your boss. Let them speed up your transfer. Sarah, our daughter must know the truth, however bitter it may be. Especially now that they know where we are. Now that they are seeking a meeting. No, David. Mother objected heatedly. Not now. Definitely not now. We'll move this summer. And for now, Eleanor and I are going to my cousin's place in Altai. She's been inviting us for a long time. You can sort everything out here. What about school? Father couldn't calm down. What about school? The last quarter is always short and hectic. Nothing terrible will happen if Eleanor misses this month. I'm taking leave tomorrow, and we're leaving. Sarah, I think we're making a mistake. You can't run from the past. It's already catching up to us, breathing down our necks. We'll see about that, Mother said confidently, and headed to the bathroom, indicating that the conversation was over. Eleanor lay there trying to make sense of what she had heard. One thing was clear. They were hiding some truth from her, something so serious and possibly even frightening that they were ready to take her away to relatives in Altai just so Eleanor wouldn't find out about something. But what? The girl understood that asking her parents directly was useless. They would find a way to evade, but they wouldn't say anything. Something was being kept from her. And it was unsettling, but also interesting. Perhaps even more interesting. The next evening, when Eleanor returned from school and her parents from work, Mother announced the trip to Altai. "You're all pale, tired," the woman smiled, looking into her daughter's eyes. "You need to rest and gather your strength. It's nothing serious. You'll miss a month of school. I've already spoken to your teacher. They'll give you your yearly grades." "Yes, you'll stay with your aunt," Father supported. "The nature there is breathtaking." Eleanor didn't object. She liked the idea of missing the last quarter. A trip instead of boring lessons. What could be better? But the girl really wanted to understand. Why did her parents suddenly need to take her so far from home? Who were they hiding from? Why were they running? What truth were they keeping from her? Eleanor's imagination worked perfectly. She and her mother traveled to Altai by train. For all 3 days of the journey, the girl built theories. Maybe her father's business partners were threatening him. Or maybe her parents had an enemy from the past, so they were forced to hide? What if she had some unsuccessful older brother? He grew up, became a bandit, and now, for some reason, had reappeared. After all, Father said that someone had found out where they lived. That's why all the commotion about the trip to Altai and the move to the capital. Eleanor decided that now she would deliberately go to bed late. Maybe she would manage to overhear a conversation between her mother and aunt? Surely they would discuss this situation. But the new place gave the girl so many impressions and emotions that she somehow even forgot about her parents' secret. Amazing nature, new friends, even first love. This trip turned out to be very bright and eventful for Eleanor. A string of exciting events pushed the anxious thoughts out of her head. As always at such times, Eleanor stopped seeing that girl in her dreams. Nothing surprising? Eleanor had long noticed. When her life was filled with adventures and strong emotions, the friend from her dreams temporarily disappeared. But then she always reappeared. Eleanor left her aunt's place almost in tears. She had grown to love this wonderful place so much. The girl had already broken up with her first love. But here, Eleanor had made so many friends. They saw her and her mother off at the station, along with her aunt and uncle. The girl never returned to her hometown. She didn't even get to say goodbye to her friends. She and her mother went straight to Moscow to a new apartment. Over those couple of months, Father had sorted everything out, arranged his work transfer to the capital, found housing, organized the move. Eleanor liked the new place. A spacious apartment, stylish furniture, a magnificent view from the window. And very close by, practically within walking distance, so much of interest. Red Square, a huge zoo, the Tretyakov Gallery, amusement parks, amazing exhibitions, wonderful cafes and restaurants. It was great just walking around Moscow, both during the day and especially in the evening when lights were everywhere and music played from all directions. Summer flew by unnoticed. It was time to go to school. Eleanor was very worried about how she, the new girl, would be received by the class. On the eve of September 1st, her friend from her dreams finally came to her for the first time in a long while. She encouragingly put her arms around Eleanor's shoulders. The girl looked at her with sympathy and a quiet smile, clearly offering support. Eleanor was very happy about her friend's appearance. She had so much to share with her. The girl from her dreams, as always, listened attentively to Eleanor and remained silent. But nevertheless, Eleanor felt the energy of warmth emanating from her, enveloping her, giving her confidence. Everything will be fine for her in the new school. That's what the girl seemed to instill in her. And so it turned out. Eleanor quickly integrated into the class, and life flowed on as usual. It happened on a fine May evening. Eleanor was returning home after classes. She was finishing her third year at the medical academy. She was one of the most promising students in her faculty, of which she was rightly proud. Medicine fascinated her. Finding the cause of a patient's ailment was like solving a puzzle. Eleanor had loved complex problems since childhood. Unlike most of her classmates, the girl had already decided on her specialization, cardiology. The mysteries of the heart beckoned her. But there was also a personal motive. Her mother. She had recently suffered a heart attack. Eleanor wanted to help her and other patients like her. The girl watched the road carefully. She was driving her own car. Her father had given it to her for her 18th birthday. And for almost 2 years now, Eleanor had been cruising in the car instead of rattling to and from university in a crowded bus. The picture was slightly marred by traffic jams, but Eleanor had gotten used to them and accepted them as inevitable. The girl enjoyed being behind the wheel. She would put on her favorite music, open the window to let the wind blow through the cabin, and speed down the highway. Beautiful. Eleanor was a very cautious driver, always strictly adhering to traffic rules, keeping an eye on the situation. Driving was a pleasure, but the girl never lost vigilance behind the wheel. That evening, everything was as usual. The impact came from where Eleanor least expected it, from the right. The girl, as she should have, was crossing the intersection on a green light, but the driver of an old rusty car with loud music blaring from its open windows apparently didn't want to wait his turn. He ran a red light. It was later revealed that the 17-year-old guy, who hadn't even gotten his license yet, had drunk a lot that evening and taken his brother's car without permission to impress his girlfriend, to show what a daring driver he was. Well, he made an impression. At high speed, he crashed into Eleanor's car. Strangely, nothing serious happened to him, only his face was slightly cut by tiny shards of the windshield. But his passenger was less fortunate. The young girl was taken to the hospital with multiple fractures. Eleanor felt a strong jolt. The car spun in place. The girl understood that she was trapped in the twisted metal. The car's body had deformed and crumpled from the impact. Eleanor was trapped. The girl didn't feel pain as such. Shock was in effect. But as a future medical professional, she perfectly understood the severity of her injuries. A fractured femur, at least. Her spine, fortunately, seemed intact, but she had a deep laceration on her abdomen. This was the most dangerous thing. While waiting for rescuers and the ambulance crew, the girl watched as her light-colored t-shirt quickly soaked with blood. She had severe bleeding. Her head was spinning, and black spots and blurred patches flickered before her eyes. People were crowding around. Some guys tried to help her, to extract her from the cabin. They brought tools, unscrewing something. They couldn't do it. The second car suffered less. It had flown off to the side of the road. Eleanor saw a girl lying unconscious on the asphalt, and next to her, squatting, covering his face with his hands, the culprit of the accident was rocking back and forth. It was slowly dawning on him what he had done. It seemed Eleanor did lose consciousness for a while. She didn't remember the moment the rescuers arrived, extracting her from the crumpled cabin. She didn't see the doctors who put her in the ambulance. Eleanor came to herself when she was being wheeled, apparently, into the operating room. The surgeons were ready, masks covering half their faces, now on white coats, caps. Hurriedly walking alongside the gurney were the girl's parents, pale, frightened, anxious. Someone had already called them, informed them of what had happened, and they, of course, had rushed there immediately. Eleanor, strangely enough, felt neither pain nor fear. Everything happening seemed like a dream. "We'll need blood." Eleanor heard the voice of one of the doctors in white coats right next to her ear. "They're already bringing it from the blood bank." The parents didn't match. They both have O positive, and the girl has B negative. Eleanor suddenly felt herself drifting off again. Dark spots flickered before her eyes, blurring and turning into smudges. As she sank into oblivion, the girl managed to wonder, how can that be? Mom and Dad have O positive and I have B negative. That's impossible. Eleanor had studied genetics and knew this for certain. And then the girl somehow immediately found herself at the edge of a dark forest. It was the very beginning of autumn, the girl's favorite time of year. The leaves were just beginning to take on golden hues. In the field stretching out before the forest, bright flowers dotted the landscape. Eleanor inhaled the fresh, clean air, filled with the scent of herbs, with pleasure. There could be no doubt this was one of those dreams. Soon she would appear here, the friend Eleanor had known all her life, a wonderful dream, and right now her support wouldn't hurt. Indeed, a slender girl in a long sundress of an amazing light blue shade appeared from behind the bushes. She smiled, but her eyes were somehow anxious. As always, silently, she approached Eleanor. The girls sat down right in the soft grass, leaning their backs against the rough trunk of a tree. Neither said a word, but they understood each other perfectly without it. Now the girl from the dream was trying to encourage her friend, suggesting that everything would be all right. Eleanor understood. She had nothing to worry about. The girl from her dreams was never wrong, and certainly never lied. And the anxiety in her friend's eyes, that was concerning, of course. A hidden sadness. Eleanor had noticed it before. Something was clearly troubling her friend, but she, as usual, remained silent. Eleanor mentally asked the girl how she was doing. She smiled back, waved her hand carelessly as if not wanting to upset her. But Eleanor saw, she perfectly understood that something was happening with her old friend. And for some reason, they were seeing each other much less often. It was all strange. Eleanor didn't know how long she had spent at the edge of the forest, sitting in the grass and admiring the fantastically beautiful sunset. Such sunsets didn't exist in the real world. The sky blazed and shimmered with bright red, purple, and deep blue hues. The sight was mesmerizing, calming, relaxing. Then the girlfriend stood up, smiled goodbye, and disappeared. She didn't walk away, didn't hide behind a bush or a turn. She seemed to simply dissolve into the air. Eleanor never managed to catch that moment. It seemed her friend vanished the instant Eleanor blinked. A fraction of a second was enough. So the wonderful dream would soon end. It was always like that. And indeed, Eleanor opened her eyes and immediately squeezed them shut again. Bright light, white walls. Oh, it would have been better to stay with the friend from her dreams at the edge of the wonderful forest for just a little longer. It was so good there, so easy. And now Eleanor's whole body ached. She felt nauseous and her head was spinning badly. There was a nasty taste of medicine in her mouth. A tube protruded from her vein. An uncomfortable, constricting bandage was on her abdomen. Even breathing was difficult for the girl. Eleanor spent a couple of days in intensive care. She had undergone serious surgery. It turned out she had even been on the verge of life and death. The surgeon later admitted he was afraid he wouldn't save her, but everything worked out. Soon Eleanor was transferred to a regular ward. She was recovering quickly. Young, healthy body, the doctor explained. In a couple of months, there wouldn't even be any consequences left. This was certainly good news. In the hospital, Eleanor clearly realized how very, very lucky she had been. 10 minutes delay could have cost her life. She had lost enough blood, just a little more, and that would have been it. Speaking of blood, the girl often thought about what she had heard while losing consciousness there, on the gurney. The doctor said that both her parents had O positive blood type and she herself had B negative. But she couldn't have inherited such a group and Rh factor from her mother and father. This contradicted all laws of genetics. So what was going on? For now, the girl decided not to ask her parents unnecessary questions. They were so worried. Mother and father visited her every day in the hospital, bringing treats that she had nowhere to put. Eleanor shared the packages with her ward mates, and still, a lot was left over. And then, Eleanor was discharged. Some more time passed, and the girl returned to her former life, studies, meeting friends, parties. As the doctor had promised, the consequences of the accident no longer made themselves felt. Everything had worked out. Only one thing had changed. Her car, which had been in the accident, was beyond repair. So her father bought his daughter a new car. This time, a small SUV. For safety, he explained his choice. If you had been in that accident in this beast, you would have just been slightly scared. Eleanor didn't mind. She liked the new car much more than the old one. So stylish, powerful, big. On Eleanor's 20th birthday, when the guests, relatives, and closest friends had gone home, the birthday girl and her mother were washing dishes in the kitchen. This was their old tradition, celebrating Eleanor's birthday with numerous relatives. The girl will gather her friends the following Saturday, but today was a warm family celebration. Some relatives had specially come to the capital for her anniversary from other cities. After all, she had a wonderful family. The conversation flowed easily and naturally. Mother and daughter discussed the celebration in detail, shared their impressions, laughed and joked, made plans. Tell me about the day you gave birth to me, Eleanor suddenly asked. The question was intentionally provocative. The girl wanted to draw her mother into a frank conversation and finally clarify everything for herself. I'll probably become a mother someday too. I'm interested in everything. How long did it last? What did you feel when you saw me? What was I like in the first minutes after birth? Mother hesitated but quickly composed herself. It all happened so quickly and unexpectedly. I don't really remember anything clearly. I see, Eleanor sighed. She understood that her mother was not being entirely honest with her. How could one forget such an event? And such a long-awaited one at that. Her parents often told her how much they had dreamed of a child. But years passed, and they still had no children. They had already despaired, and then joyful news. Eleanor became a true gift of fate for them, even if a little late. Mother was clearly avoiding the answer now. This only increased Eleanor's suspicions. Perhaps the girl was looking at her mother in a special way. Maybe her gaze showed distrust. Because, no, I can't do this anymore. Mother suddenly turned off the water and heavily sat down on a chair. David, come here, to the kitchen. Father entered with a smile on his face. He had just finished vacuuming. Seeing his wife's anxious face, the man immediately became serious. It's time to tell her everything. The woman looked at her husband. He paled slightly, shivered as if cold, and then silently nodded his head and asked his daughter to sit down. Eleanor understood that now they would reveal that very family secret, the existence of which she had suspected for several years. Subconsciously, the girl felt what her parents were hiding from her. She understood it when she heard the doctors talking about blood types. Putting two and two together was not difficult. The thing is, Mother's voice trembled, and she looked helplessly at Father. He took over. Eleanor, he said, you know we love you very, very much. Eleanor nodded. She was absolutely sure of this. Few of her acquaintances were surrounded by such love, attention, and care as she was. You're completely grown up now, Father continued. And of course, you have the right to know. You see, we adopted you, Mother finished for her husband. Eleanor exhaled loudly. Her ears pounded. She had suspected this was the case, but it was one thing to make guesses and another to hear the truth. A swarm of questions immediately rushed into her head. Who are my parents? Do you know where they live? Do I have brothers or sisters? Why did they give me up? Her parents exchanged bewildered glances. It's just that I need to know so much. I'm literally bursting with questions. It's a whole avalanche. But we don't have answers to nearly all of them. Mother shook her head. Your biological mother? I only know that she was a very young girl from a disadvantaged family. A child herself. How could she raise a baby? You didn't have brothers or sisters at that time. What about now? Who knows? We never met your family? We only know about them from the words of the orphanage staff. The man looked at his wife in surprise. Eleanor understood that she was again holding something back. Mom, this time, please be completely frank with me, the girl asked. Don't hide anything from me. I'm an adult. I'm ready for any truth. It won't affect my relationship with you in any way. You are my parents. I love you very much. Well, it wasn't exactly as I just told you. Mother confessed. I just embellished the story a little. There's an unpleasant detail for you. It's not particularly significant, actually. But since you want complete honesty, then here it is. This family you were born into, they were neighbors of my grandmother. And you could say we bought you from them. I didn't want you to know about that. Bought? Eleanor repeated. A nasty chill ran down her spine at the word. How? Well, as your mother said, you were born to a young girl from a disadvantaged family. Father joined the conversation. She didn't have an abortion in time, and then it was too late. Grandma Anna noticed the young neighbor's belly, talked to her mother. She said they were going to give the child to an orphanage. And Grandma, she suggested transferring the child, meaning you to us. All the relatives knew how much we dreamed of a baby. And then such an opportunity presented itself. Your family, they were poor, but they were all healthy, strong, good genes. Taking a child from an orphanage, you could get a pig in a poke there. But they realized we really needed a child, Mother added to the story. They started bargaining, demanded money, and who can blame them for that? The woman was raising 5 children alone. Your biological mother was the oldest. They were truly very, very needy. We gave them money, enough so they could improve their financial situation. And when you were born, they simply gave you to us. It was difficult afterwards to arrange the documents for a child obtained in this way. But we managed, we sorted everything out. You didn't spend a single day in an orphanage. And where are they now? Eleanor's voice trembled, unexpected tears welling up in her eyes. Unknown, her parents answered in unison. They left afterwards, Mother explained. Something happened with them. Apparently they went to relatives in another city. I don't know where, and I didn't want to know. Why? Over time, I somehow came to believe that you were mine, got used to the idea. And then, when you became a teenager, they reminded us of themselves, Father continued. Your grandmother, the mother of the girl who gave birth to you. She showed up at my work. I don't know where she got the address. She said she needed money. She demanded money, threatened to tell you everything. It was a real nightmare. That's why we moved. You and your mother went to Altai, and I sorted out all the moving issues. We were afraid that this woman, that she would somehow harm you. She had such an aggressive attitude. We were scared, to be honest. Very scared, Mother confirmed. Eleanor thought. So that's what Father and Mother were talking about many years ago on the eve of the move when Eleanor accidentally overheard them. The girl remembered that night in the smallest detail. It was then that she realized there was some secret in their family. So my blood relatives are poor extortionists? Rather just desperate people, Father shrugged. They had a lot of bad luck in life. And in any case, that has nothing to do with them. Mother smiled at the girl. We raised and brought you up. You are a wonderful person, intelligent, responsible, kind. You are you, and they are somewhere far away. Don't even think about them. But Eleanor, of course, couldn't help but think about her unknown relatives. The frank conversation with her parents had changed a lot. Now the girl often tried to imagine her birth mother. She knew little about her. She was evidently still very young, not much older than Eleanor herself, and most likely still living in poverty. Surely Eleanor had younger brothers and sisters, and definitely 4. After all, her parents said that her mother was the oldest of 5 children. That was a whole bunch of relatives. Eleanor adored her parents, but she often dreamed of them being younger, like her friends' mothers and fathers. And the girl had also dreamed of a sister or brothers all her childhood. And now it turned out that she had all of that. What a twist of fate. Eleanor decided for herself that when she was older, she would definitely find her own. And she absolutely had to see them to find out what they were like, what they looked like, and how and where they lived, what they did. It was important. It was very important. The girl didn't get any specific information from her parents. According to them, it seemed that at some point, Eleanor's mother's family moved to another city, and then many years later, the grandmother suddenly appeared and demanded money in exchange for silence. The search had to start in the city where Eleanor spent her childhood. That was obvious. And she would have to do everything in secret from her parents. The girl saw that her questions caused them pain. They were already quite elderly, and her mother had a heart condition. No, she shouldn't worry them unnecessarily. Eleanor would figure it out herself. She wasn't a child anymore. The girl went back to her hometown several times. She was looking for a thread that would lead her to her blood relatives. She sifted through the archives of local maternity hospitals and children's clinics, questioned old acquaintances and friends of her parents, having previously arranged with them not to inform her mother and father about her visit, but she didn't learn much. It turned out that she was registered as a foundling and immediately transferred to the custody of the people who found the infant, her father and mother. The real parents of the newborn were, of course, looked for as a formality, but naturally, they were never found. That was all. Eleanor decided she wouldn't give up. Soon she would finish university, get a job, start earning a salary, and then she would have money for private detectives. After all, she couldn't manage without professional help. 10 years of Eleanor's life flew by unnoticed from the moment she made the firm decision to find her birth mother. The girl had changed significantly. She graduated from university with honors, got a job. Almost immediately, she started a romance with a colleague, a young and promising head of the surgical department, Michael. This was true love. The young people didn't delay. They had a noisy, cheerful wedding with many elegantly dressed guests, a toastmaster, decorated cars, and other festive attributes. Eleanor's parents were happy. They had raised their daughter, given her an education, and even married her off. Now, they could relax and wait for grandchildren. Eleanor and Michael decided not to rush with children. The girl wanted to establish herself in her profession. She liked being a doctor. She hadn't been mistaken. Cardiology truly turned out to be her life's work. Nevertheless, 3 years after the wedding, the family grew. Eleanor and Michael had wonderful twin daughters. The young parents decided to surprise the grandparents. They didn't say there would be 2 children until the birth. Everyone was so surprised at the discharge. But they were also happy, of course. Eleanor's mother even shed a tear. What a miracle! I couldn't believe my eyes. Eleanor's mother-in-law examined the newborn granddaughters. Double happiness. No one in our family has ever had twins. Perhaps this luck came to the family through your line. Eleanor smiled and said nothing. Michael's parents were not aware of her story. Not because the girl was embarrassed by it, she simply didn't want to unnecessarily share such details with people. She herself didn't know if there had been twins in her family line. Eleanor enjoyed motherhood. It wasn't easy, but the grandparents actively helped. The girls grew, bringing joy to relatives on both sides. Eleanor's mother, looking at her granddaughters, sometimes couldn't hold back tears. To think what happiness. I lived to see grandchildren. But the happiness for the elderly woman was short-lived. Age, a bad heart. One day, Eleanor's mother had another heart attack, and this time they couldn't save her. Eleanor took the loss hard. The person who had done so much for her, who had loved her so much, was gone. Eleanor, orphaned, was supported by her husband, in-laws, and friends. The little ones constantly needed their mother and didn't let her fall into apathy. And yet, it was her father who pulled Eleanor out of her stupor. One day she noticed how old and drawn her father had become, and she realized that he needed help and support far more than she did. From then on, Eleanor came to her parents' apartment every day. In the morning, she would put her daughters in the car and drive to her father's. Together, they played with the children, reminisced about the past, cooked, cleaned, and looked at photographs. There were several thick, worn albums. Eleanor wondered why she hadn't been drawn to these pictures before. After all, they were a living visual history of her family. Here was mother, still a very young first-year student, so cheerful, carefree. And here was father, a young intern, serious, thoughtful, focused. One of Eleanor's daughters was surprisingly similar to her grandfather. The woman sometimes even forgot that they didn't share genes. Often, father would take the little ones and go out into the yard with them. Eleanor would admire from the window how happily they played together. The elderly man literally blossomed next to his granddaughters. They gave him the strength and energy to live on. During this time, Eleanor would clean up and bustle in the kitchen. Father wasn't used to running a household on his own. He said he didn't need much for himself. But still, his daughter tried very hard, cooking his favorite dishes. True, they didn't turn out as tasty as mother's, but it was still better than nothing. So many significant events and changes had occurred in Eleanor's life over the past decades, both good, joyful ones, and sad, even tragic ones. It was no wonder that the woman temporarily put aside the idea of searching for her blood relatives. No, she always remembered it. But she had no time for family secrets. So many worries, so many incidents, so many problems that needed to be solved urgently. The friend from her dreams came to Eleanor less and less often. Now she appeared once every 3 or 4 months. And of course, she grew up along with Eleanor. They still didn't talk, but they understood each other perfectly, without words, and were very happy to meet. One fine May day, Eleanor was sitting on the sofa in her parents' apartment with her legs tucked under her, flipping through an album. Through the open window came the cheerful voices of her daughters. They had started an active game with their grandfather. He was all for it. Father had told Eleanor more than once that his granddaughters kept him in shape, didn't let him get down. Eleanor smiled, looking at the old pictures. She hadn't seen these before. Black and white, with a decorative frame. They were over half a century old, almost antiques. Nevertheless, the photographs still smelled of printing ink. one of the pictures particularly caught Eleanor's attention. In it, she noticed her mother at the age of 12 or 13. It was definitely her. Eleanor recognized the large, wide-open eyes, the curly hair, and the mole on her cheek. Eleanor had seen few photos of her mother at that age, so she was now looking at this old picture with interest. Mother as a girl was sitting surrounded by adults, probably her parents and some older relatives. An interesting thought suddenly struck Eleanor. In the past, people wrote the names of the people in the photo on the back and made other important notes. The year of the picture, the place. The woman took the photograph out of the album, turned it over. Just as she thought. In neat handwriting on the yellowed cardboard, someone had written the words, from left to right, Helen, John Semin, Zoe, Anna, Sally, Alexievka, July 1959. Sally, that was the girl, meaning Eleanor's mother. Anna, her maternal grandmother. Mother had said she named her only daughter after her beloved grandma. The woman didn't know the other people. Maybe her parents had told her about these relative ones, but who would have listened attentively back then? And Alexeyevka, apparently, was the name of the very village where Eleanor was born. That's where her blood relatives once lived. Her parents said that Eleanor was born to a young neighbor of her mother's grandmother. This same Anna, shown in the photograph. Grandma Anna helped her granddaughter and her husband become parents. It was no wonder they named their daughter after her. Everything fit. So, Eleanor's small homeland was Alexeyevka itself. Maybe there were people still living there who knew her relatives. Eleanor closed the album and exhaled heavily. Alexeyevka. That's where she needed to start her search. The desire to find her biological mother, which had been dormant for a while, resurrected with new force. Eleanor realized she could no longer sit idly by. It was time to learn the truth about her relatives, however bitter or unpleasant it might be. It was scary, of course. But how could she live on without knowing her roots? She had to find out about her birth family, if only for the sake of her daughters. At home, Eleanor shared her thoughts with Michael. Her husband always supported his beloved wife in everything. Of course, he knew her difficult story. I'm with you, the man simply replied after listening to Eleanor. When do we leave? The woman smiled. She hadn't expected any other reaction from Michael. With him, she wasn't afraid of anything. They would overcome everything. They decided to go the very next weekend. What was the point of waiting? The sooner Eleanor knew the truth, the better. All preparatory measures were taken during the week. Michael arranged for his parents to take the granddaughters for 2 days. Eleanor found out where Alexeyevka was located and how to get there. And she filled her car's gas tank to the brim. On the eve of the fateful trip, the woman couldn't fall asleep. Her heart was pounding. Her arms and legs felt like cotton. Michael had long been peacefully snoring on his side of the bed, while she kept staring at the ceiling. Eleanor didn't understand herself. What did she want more? To find her birth family in Alexeyevka and meet the people who had once sold her to strangers, or not to find any trace of her biological mother in that village at all? In the morning, Eleanor and Michael were already driving along the country highway. The woman sat in the passenger seat. In that state, she shouldn't have been driving. Eleanor was so nervous that she periodically trembled. Michael, seeing his wife's anxiety, tried his best to cheer her up. Fields, meadows, and plantations ran along both sides of the highway. From time to time, villages and settlements flashed by. The couple had left just as dawn was breaking. They reached Alexeyevka closer to lunchtime. The sun was already high in the sky. Well, here we are. Michael parked the car near a modest sign with the village's name. It was a small settlement with deserted, narrow streets. The houses here were varied. Some very small, leaning, blackened with age, and some solid, quite modern, with satellite dishes under their roofs. "And how do we find the right house?" Eleanor asked, bewildered. "Asking doesn't hurt," Michael replied casually and confidently walked forward. Eleanor hurried after him. First, they simply walked around the village, taking a look. Eleanor looked around in surprise. She had never been to such a place. Quiet, sparsely populated, calm, even somewhat sleepy. Curious chickens scurried in the road dust, and cautious cats prowled. Muffled conversations came from some yards. The smells of homemade food, mixed with the scents of sun-heated herbs, filled the air. Soon the couple came out onto a spacious area, something like a square. And here they finally met people. Several elderly people sat on a bench under a sprawling tall tree, discussing something. Women in brightly colored calico dresses were chatting on the porch of a shop. Little children clung to the hems of two of them. A little further away, near a building that looked like a warehouse, a group of children was playing, boys and girls, tanned, almost black, dirty, and barefoot. "Well, here are the locals," Michael concluded. The people noticed the strangers and openly stared at them, glancing at them secretly, observing the rules of decency. But of course, these glances could not escape Eleanor and Michael. The children behaved more directly, left their game, and looked at the newcomers with curiosity. Yes, it was clear that Alexeyevka was not often graced by the presence of visitors. Michael approached the women on the porch, smiled charmingly, and greeted them. "Hello to you too," one of the ladies replied. "Who are you here to see?" "Not anyone specific," Michael began to explain. "We just want to find one house. My wife's great-grandmother's house. Just out of interest, the woman's name was Anna Stepanovna Rogacheva. Maybe you remember Grandma Anna?" "Grandma Anna?" replied a red-haired woman with bright green eyes. A chubby little boy, also red-haired and covered in freckles, clung tightly to her hand. "Of course we remember. She was a good, kind woman. She simply adored us children. She really dreamed of great-grandchildren. She didn't have any then. So you, it turns out, are her great-granddaughter?" The oldest woman in the group examined Eleanor carefully with her eyes. The others were younger, around 35 to 40 at most. This one could have been someone's mother by age. "Yes, I'm her great-granddaughter. I wanted to see where my great-grandmother lived to learn more about my roots." Eleanor noticed that the women were whispering and looking at her strangely. It was unpleasant. "The house is on the 3rd street from here, on Tsvetokhnaya, number 19, the elderly woman replied. "But no one lives there anymore. It's been empty since old Anna died. Your parents couldn't sell it. Who would want to move to our remote village? No fools were found." Michael and Eleanor thanked the women for the information and moved on. Why were they looking at me like that? Eleanor wondered. Did you notice they almost drilled holes in you with their eyes? Nothing surprising. A new face and a relative of their fellow villager whom everyone knew. People are just curious. Don't worry about it. But they were whispering about something? Eleanor continued. I heard something like, they're like 2 drops of water, and blood is thicker than water. Who do they think I look like? Not Grandma Anna, surely. As it turns out, we don't even share genes. Well, maybe they don't know that story? Michael shrugged. So they saw the resemblance. I don't know. I think in a village, such an event would be hard to hide. Most likely, people are aware, perhaps, then it's even more understandable why they were staring. And here's the house we need. Michael pointed to a leaning fence. Behind the time-worn fence lay an overgrown garden. Weeds, unimpeded by anything, had taken over the entire area. They had even managed to grow on the roof of the time-blackened shed. In the center of this green sea stood a small house. Once, perhaps, it had been painted bright blue. Now the paint was faded and peeling. The windows were broken, the door hung on a single hinge. It was clear that everything inside had long been covered in dust and cobwebs. Surely it was a paradise for insects and small animals. I don't really want to go in there. Eleanor shook her head. I don't like any of this. Yeah, I don't feel like it either, Michael agreed. He took a few photos of the house and garden, then added, but we didn't come here for this house, did we? We need to find information about your relatives. That is, to find the house where they once lived. I understood it was the neighbors across the street, Eleanor said, and turned around. When my mother told me, she said, the neighbor's house across from Grandma's. Michael also turned around. Now both of them were looking at another house. It was small, somewhat shabby, but clearly inhabited. Neatly trimmed grass, curtains on the windows, a forgotten book on a bench in the garden, several well-tended beds, carrots, onions, peppers. Someone definitely lived here. What do we do? Eleanor asked, looking at Michael. We'll just knock and ask who lives here. Excellent idea, Michael approved and moved toward the gate. Eleanor stopped her husband. Maybe it's better to watch for a while first? Wait until someone appears in the garden or at the gate, and then approach. It feels a bit awkward otherwise. As you wish, Michael didn't argue. Only we could sit here until evening like this. Who knows? Maybe people are at work. But Eleanor insisted. Meeting the inhabitants of the house scared her. After all, they could be her relatives, or, on the contrary, people who knew absolutely nothing about them. Then the search would reach a dead end. Which option was better? Eleanor still didn't have an answer to that question. The couple sat down on a sun-warmed boulder by the fence of the abandoned house on Cvetorknaya Street. Poor houses stood around them. Many, like Eleanor's great-grandmother's dwelling, were empty and overgrown with weeds, poverty, and desolation. A sad sight. Eleanor tried to imagine this street in the past, when it was still alive and inhabited. Perhaps children's voices rang out here, boys on bicycles scurried back and forth, and clotheslines with drying colorful laundry were strung in the yards. Now, this area resembled a ghost town. And yet, someone still remained here. Eleanor didn't know how long she and Michael had sat there, intently watching the neighbor's house. Probably more than an hour had passed. At least, the sun was already beginning to set. Michael even seemed to have fallen asleep. Eleanor didn't disturb him. She, as always, was fantasizing, imagining different scenarios for the situation. And for some reason, they all scared her. What happened next, she certainly hadn't expected. The door of the little house opposite suddenly opened quietly. A woman in a wheelchair appeared on the porch. She rolled down the makeshift wooden ramp from the porch and quickly wheeled herself toward the bench where the forgotten book lay. Eleanor nudged Michael with her elbow. He opened his eyes and also stared at the resident of the old house. She had just turned her back to them. It was time to act. The couple got up from their spot and approached the fence. "Hello," Michael said, in the most friendly tone he could muster. Eleanor also greeted her. The woman turned around, looking at the guests with curiosity. Eleanor and Michael exhaled in surprise. The inhabitant of the house made a similar sound. Her eyebrows shot up sharply. Her eyes widened. Eleanor grabbed her husband's hand to keep from falling. Unable to believe her eyes, she looked at the woman in the wheelchair while the woman stared intently at her. This simply cannot be. The thought flashed through Eleanor's mind. This was her friend from her dreams, the very one she had known all her life. They had grown up and changed together. This was simply incredible. Finally, Michael broke the silence. I don't understand anything. You're so alike. An amazing resemblance. The man hadn't expressed himself entirely accurately. Eleanor and the woman in the wheelchair weren't just similar. They were exact copies. The same eyes, nose, and lips, slightly curly light brown hair. Both were slender and tall, and even their tans were of the same shade, coffee with milk. Is that really you? The woman said, stunned. A joyful sparkle appeared in her eyes. I don't believe this. Come in, guess. They didn't need to be asked twice. Maybe you'd like some tea or water? I have compote in the fridge too. Eleanor shook her head negatively. She still hadn't regained her ability to speak. Please sit down, the hostess continued to fuss. You can sit here on the bench. You can go to the backyard. I have a gazebo there. Michael led Eleanor to the bench by the wall of the little house and helped her settle down. He sat next to her. The woman wheeled herself up to them and began looking at Eleanor again, this time with a gentle smile on her face. So this is what you're like. I imagined you just like this. Who are you? Eleanor looked up at the woman. The warm smile of the house's inhabitant encouraged her, helped her compose herself. Well, let's introduce ourselves. My name is Clara. I'm your biological sister. We're twins, as you can easily guess from our appearance. You're just copies of each other, Michael remarked, like clones. Monozygotic twins are essentially clones. The doctor and Eleanor awoke. A little educational tidbit, her husband Michael teased good-naturedly. Well, now let's figure out your complicated story. That's why we came here, right? Yes, Eleanor picked up, looking into Clara's eyes. Tell me everything you know. My parents, the people who raised me, they hid the truth from me for a long time. And even afterwards, they didn't like to talk about it. There's nothing unexpected about that, Clara shrugged. If I were your parents, I'd probably behave exactly the same way. As for me, my grandmother told me everything. Not right away. I was already an adult. Grandma found out she wouldn't be around much longer. She didn't want to take this story with her. Eleanor suddenly did what she had wanted to do for a long time. She took her sister's hand. It was as if both were struck by lightning. The women looked at each other, smiled broadly, and hugged. It felt so natural, so effortless, as if there hadn't been long years of separation. In her sister's embrace, Eleanor felt warm and calm. Clara, apparently, felt the same. In some inexplicable way, Eleanor understood her sister's feelings. Perhaps this was that amazing connection between twins. Michael watched the women and couldn't help but smile. Then he took out his phone and took a few pictures. For memory, he explained to the twins. The moment is just too interesting. Indian soap operas have nothing on this. Both women smiled cheerfully. By the way, our story really is more interesting than any Indian soap opera, Clara remarked, and began her narrative. Many years ago, a large family lived in this very house. A single mother, Linda, with 5 children. There wasn't enough money to feed such a crowd. The woman worked from morning till night. She was a cleaner at the collective farm, and then she also worked as a dishwasher in the local canteen. And she did odd jobs here and there. Sometimes she earned extra money. Sometimes she weeded someone's garden. Sometimes she helped clean a yard. She worked like a squirrel in a wheel, and still the family lived in poverty. Linda's husband had disappeared long ago. He went to the capital for work, and that was it, gone for good. Either something happened to him, or he decided to start a new life. The woman didn't rule out the second option either. Whatever the case, she was left completely alone with 5 children to support. The eldest daughter, Jessica, was initially a support for her mother. She looked after her younger brothers and sisters, cleaned the house, even cooked. Every task she undertook was done well. She was a capable girl, handy, and good at managing the household. Her mother couldn't praise Jessica enough. And then the girl grew up, and it was as if she was replaced. From a compliant, home-loving child, Jessica turned into a prickly, difficult teenager. Grandma said that Jessica, our mother, started demanding expensive clothes and money for entertainment, and also insulting her mother for not being able to provide a normal existence for the children. Jessica suddenly wanted a beautiful life. She dreamed of dressing fashionably, going to the city for discos, using expensive cosmetics. Of course, a cleaner mother couldn't fulfill the desires of her rapidly growing daughter. Linda hoped that Jessica's behavior was nothing more than a teenage rebellion. She knew that sometimes it was difficult for children to grow up, and she hoped that with time, her daughter would become her old self again. But the older the girl became, the more the problem worsened. Her mother couldn't provide Jessica with a beautiful life. The girl threw a tantrum for a bit and accepted this fact. Yes, she was from a poor family. Her mother didn't even have money for decent food and clothes for the children. And that meant she needed to find other sponsors. That was all. Young, attractive Jessica, of course, found them without difficulty. It was enough to appear at a city disco in a miniskirt once. The teenage girl acquired adult admirers and new friends. Jessica looked like a grown woman, dressed and behaved accordingly. But in essence, she was still just a child who knew nothing of life. Her mother's heart ached with fear and anxiety for her eldest daughter, but she couldn't do anything with Jessica. She had no respect for her. Should she chain the girl to a radiator? Linda tried, of course, to influence her wayward child. She scolded her daughter, punished her, even locked her in the house. But she always ran away, found a way to slip out, and off she went, towards adventures and a beautiful, cheerful life. Sometimes Jessica would disappear into the city for days, then reappear at home. She smelled of cigarettes, sharp perfume. The girl's whole appearance indicated that she had clearly become addicted to drinking. Her mother desperately tried to reason with her wayward child, gave examples from life, scared her with possible consequences, told her how cruel people could be. But Jessica just smirked. She lived a fun, free, vibrant life. Her new friends had money, and they denied the young charmer nothing. Of course, she also had to pay in some sense, but this didn't bother Jessica. The girl started disappearing from home more and more often, her absences becoming longer. And then one day, a neighbor whose children studied in the city reported that Jessica was living with some man as his wife. Now the girl didn't appear in Alexeyevka at all, only called occasionally to say that she was fine. Meanwhile, Linda was beside herself with worry, sensing something bad in her heart. Jessica was living with an adult man who had come to their town from another country for work. What if he took her daughter far, far away and she would never see her again? Or something worse would happen. There were rumors that this man drank heavily, and the woman knew nothing else about her young daughter's chosen one. Several months passed, and then one dark February night, there was a knock at the door. Her daughter stood on the threshold, gaunt, pale, with dark circles under her eyes and a huge belly that her winter coat no longer buttoned over. It turned out that Jessica's man had returned to his homeland, where he already had a family. He didn't plan to leave his wife or abandon his children. And then there was Jessica with her pregnancy. He sent the girl for an abortion. She wasn't against it, but at the hospital, it turned out that the time limit had passed. She would have to give birth. The future father preferred to return home to his own. He didn't need all these problems. Jessica went to her mother in Alexeyevka. Where else could she go? She didn't know how to work, and she didn't want to. Life in the city was expensive. Linda, despite the circumstances, was happy about her daughter's return. First, she fed her, then hugged her tightly. They even cried together. Times were tough. The family was living hand to mouth. Linda worked tirelessly, but the pay was low and sometimes wages were delayed altogether. More and more often, the woman thought that they couldn't afford Jessica's baby, especially since the girl with a small child wouldn't be able to go to work for a long time, and the family was already barely making ends meet. The younger children were even teased at school for their worn-out clothes and lack of necessary supplies. The problem solved itself. One evening, a neighbor, elderly Anna Rogacheva, dropped by. As always, she brought treats for the children, hot cabbage pies, a few candies, a jar of raspberry jam, and then she started a long and serious conversation with the hostess. Everyone in the village knew that Sarah, Anna Rogacheva's granddaughter, couldn't have a baby. She had been married for a long time, but still no children. She had even sought treatment somewhere, but it hadn't helped. And it was such a good, well-off family. The young couple lived in a large apartment. Both spouses had more than decent salaries. They had a car, and they flew to the sea every year for vacation. they could give their child everything, show them the world, shower them with toys and beautiful clothes. But years passed, and there was still no baby. Linda sighed heavily. They, on the other hand, had plenty of that commodity children. Look, another one was coming soon. How could they raise them? What could they feed them? There were more questions than answers. And why was everything in the world arranged so strangely and unfairly? And then Anna Rogacheva laid out her plan. She was offering a large sum of money for Jessica's baby, who was about to be born. Sarah and her husband David would adopt the child. At first, Linda reacted hostilely to the offer. How could that be? What kind of barbarity? Anna Rogacheva suggested she calm down and think about it, not decide rashly, and discuss it with her daughter. And she left, giving the neighbors time to reflect. Linda was categorically against the old woman's proposal. But Jessica, she, it turned out, had overheard her mother's conversation with Anna Rogacheva, and the neighbor's offer interested her greatly. Just think, she persuaded her mother, it will be good for everyone. We'll get rid of an extra mouth to feed, Sarah will get the long-awaited child, and we'll get money, which is absolutely not Lishni right now. To give away your own flesh and blood to strangers. Linda shook her head doubtfully. How can I live with that afterwards? What's so bad about it? Jessica insisted. We're not giving the baby to an orphanage where orphans have a hard time. He'll live in a rich family. Just imagine. He'll have everything he needs for happiness. And what can we give a child? He'll cry just like my younger siblings because they're teased at school for patches on their clothes. In the end, Jessica convinced her mother. Linda went to Anna Rogacheva and informed her that they agreed. A few weeks later, Jessica went into labor. Right at home, almost a month earlier than expected. That's why the girl didn't manage to go to the hospital in advance, as agreed. Everything happened rapidly. Linda had to deliver the baby herself. Fortunately, she had given birth to 5 children herself and had some idea of what to do. And then everyone was in for a surprise. Twins were born, 2 girls at once. Anna Rogacheva, upon hearing the news, was delighted. Even better, she smiled, looking at the 2 wailing babies. There will be 2 children in the family at once. But soon it turned out that one of the girls was not healthy. Sarah and David came to pick up the children along with a doctor. He examined the babies and delivered his verdict. One infant is simply wonderful, no abnormalities. But the second one, the doctor picked up tiny Clara. This girl has big problems. Most likely she will never be able to move. Everything indicates damage to the central nervous system, consequences of premature birth, and possibly the child experienced oxygen deprivation during pregnancy. This happens when the mother leads an unhealthy lifestyle. Jessica lowered her eyes to the floor, and she knew perfectly well what kind of lifestyle she had led during her pregnancy. David and Sarah refused to take the sick girl. They were upset, of course. Sarah even cried a little. The couple had already planned to become parents of 2 little ones at once. They had even prepared a room for the twins. But raising a disabled child, they were not ready for that. So Clara remained with her birth family. Eleanor went to the city. Grandma Linda said they initially wanted to put me in an orphanage, Clara recalled. They had even filled out the documents. Jessica just needed to write a refusal. Grandma was scared. She didn't think she could handle such a difficult child. There wasn't enough money for healthy children, let alone a disabled one who needed medication and rehabilitation. Jessica was just happy to give the child away. She didn't need a healthy daughter. And then this. The doctors who examined little Clara all gave unfavorable prognosis. The examination results showed that Clara would most likely be a vegetable who wouldn't walk, talk, or understand much. Linda cried into her pillow at night. It was hard for her to bear the thought that her granddaughter was born like this. She was her own flesh and blood, after all. The doctors urged her to send the girl to an institution for the disabled, explaining that it wouldn't matter to Clara where she was. And Linda had almost decided. She was swaddling her granddaughter's limp body, getting her ready for the trip to the institution, and crying. Suddenly, a sad song about an orphan boy surfaced from the depths of her memory, and Linda began to sing it, looking at the defenseless little one who will soon be among strangers. The woman's heart was breaking with pity for her granddaughter, but they had no choice. And suddenly Clara looked directly into Linda's eyes. The sounds of the melody clearly captivated the child. The baby's gaze focused, as if filled with meaning, and the girl smiled. It wasn't a reflex muscle contraction, but a genuine smile, directed at a loved one. The girl was clearly reacting to what was happening, and she really liked the song. "You're no vegetable." Grandma gently picked up the newborn, smiling at her. "I won't give you to anyone." So Clara stayed with the family. The doctors were wrong. The girl's problems turned out not to be so terrible. Jessica didn't approve of her mother's actions. She had already managed to write the refusal. But Linda stood her ground. You can't give a child to an orphanage, especially since she understands everything. Her intelligence seems fine, but her legs and arms really were weak. It would be hard for such a child within strange walls. How could she live knowing that her own flesh and blood was suffering somewhere? Jessica just waved away her mother's arguments, but didn't really argue. She had already started a new romance. If her mother wanted a toy, let her fuss over it. What did Jessica care? She was being invited to live in the city again. Jessica fluttered off into a new life. She again had everything she had wanted: money, friends, drinks, admirers. And Linda raised her younger children and granddaughter, stretching herself to the limit. But she didn't complain about her fate. She had made her own choice. The woman never regretted her decision. Little Clara filled her heart with tenderness and pity. The girl grew up smart and beautiful. But at the proper time, the little one didn't take her first steps. Her arms were also weak, but at least they worked. But her legs, they didn't move at all. 4 years later, it became clear that Clara would never be able to walk. A fund for sick children raised money for a wheelchair. It was painful for Linda to see the child in such a device. The chair seemed to shatter the illusion that Clara was a normal, healthy girl, officially making her disabled. But Clara herself was happy with the acquisition. Of course, after all, now she had the ability to move. Time passed. Clara grew up. She even managed to go to school. By that time, The girl had completely mastered the wheelchair. In class, Clara turned out to be one of the best students, and she also made many friends. Children loved their classmate for her kind disposition and cheerful, easygoing nature. They found the well-read Clara interesting. She could instantly come up with so many games and entertainments. Linda's children grew up and moved away, and she and Clara were left alone together. Grandmother and granddaughter lived soul to soul. Sometimes Jessica would appear. Linda noted with bitterness that the dissolute lifestyle was affecting both her daughter's appearance and her personality. The girl, once young and beautiful, had turned into an untidy, fading woman with a swollen face and a hoarse, smoke-damaged voice. Linda worried about her daughter, afraid that such a life wouldn't lead to anything good. And so it happened. When Clara was in 6th grade, a tragedy occurred. A fire broke out in the apartment where Jessica was living with her latest boyfriend. One of the guests fell asleep with a cigarette right on the sofa, while all the drinking companions died in the fire. Apparently, they were in such a state that they didn't even notice the fire. Linda later read in the report that none of these people had attempted to escape. This was a heavy blow for Clara. Yes, she and Jessica had never been particularly close, but the girl knew she had a mother, loved her, and hoped that Jessica would sooner or later pull herself together. And now there was nothing left to hope for. Linda and Clara grieved for a long time over what had happened, but time passed, and both had to pull themselves together and return to normal life. And then, a new blow. Linda began to notice that she got tired quickly. She had completely lost her appetite. The woman lost weight. Neighbors and Clara literally forced her to see a doctor. Linda initially brushed them off, saying she was just overtired, nothing hurt, so there was nothing particularly to worry about. But then she finally gave in to the persuasion, especially since her own condition was worrying her. It seemed strange, unusual. It turned out to be cancer, like a bolt from the blue. Linda wasn't scared for herself, but for her granddaughter. She was still just a child, defenseless, a naive teenager. Linda couldn't leave her, absolutely couldn't. The doctor's prognoses were unfavorable. With such a disease, the maximum lifespan was 1 or 2 years. But Linda surprised everyone. She lived until her granddaughter's 18th birthday. The woman diligently underwent treatment, followed all the doctor's recommendations, and prayed. Clara had no one but her. Clara did her best to help her grandmother. She learned to do everything around the house, knew which pills Linda needed to take at what time. Grandmother and granddaughter held onto each other, cared for each other, and talked a lot. During this difficult period, Linda told her granddaughter everything. She felt the girl should know the truth. She didn't want to take these secrets to her grave. When I found out I had a twin sister, I was very happy and understood a lot, Clara said, looking directly into Eleanor's eyes. You might think I'm crazy now, but from early childhood, a friend, my exact copy, came to me in my dreams. At first, she was a little girl, but as I grew, she grew. When Grandma told me about my sister, I understood that it was probably her. After all, there's a connection between twins. Perhaps in our case, it manifested itself precisely like this, in these dreams. Eleanor looked at her sister seriously. In these dreams, you were without a wheelchair and could walk, right? Yes, Clara nodded. And you? You mean, yes, Eleanor nodded. I had those dreams too. Now I understand that we were in touch all that time. It's amazing. Like a miracle. I agree, Clara said. Perhaps it can be explained scientifically somehow? Eleanor shook her head. People just haven't discovered these communication channels yet. Everything is ahead. I waited for those dreams so much, Clara confessed. I dreamed of seeing you again. Me too. Only lately, for some reason, you've been coming to me less often. Perhaps the connection weakens over time. But now we don't need that channel anymore. Come visit whenever you want. Clara smiled. Girls, I'm listening to you and I can't believe this is all true. Michael looked stunned. And your meeting, and now the dreams too. Anything can happen in life. Clara smiled. Her face shone with happiness. The sisters held hands. So it turns out you were left completely alone at 18? Eleanor clarified. I can't imagine that. At that age, I was still a complete child, living with my parents in my childhood room, studying at university. And you, it turns out, were managing entirely on your own? I had to, Clara nodded. Of course, the neighbors helped me a lot. Sometimes uncles and aunts came to visit. But overall, yes, independent life began. It was fine, I managed. Grandma worried about me unnecessarily. She thought I would be completely lost without her. She was very worried about that. That's why she once sought out your parents in the city. She told me about it later, several years after that meeting, knowing she didn't have long left. Linda was very worried about her granddaughter. Clara couldn't walk, couldn't work. At least she had learned to take care of herself and manage the household. The disability payments were tiny, and she had no relatives nearby. The world was cruel. The girl would be lost. And so one day, Linda decided on a desperate step. She found Sarah and David in the city. The woman reasoned, as she saw it, quite logically. The couple were raising Clara's sister, not just a sister, but a twin. Perhaps these people would be moved by Clara's fate, pity her, take her into their family. Back then, many years ago, the doctor said Clara would be severely disabled. Sarah and David were scared. They didn't take the sick child. But in reality, it wasn't so terrible. Little Clara only had trouble with her legs. Linda knew that in the city, such children lived normal, full lives. Maybe Clara could even still be helped, who knows? Anna Rogacheva was no longer alive. But still, Linda got David's work address from one of the neighbors. And one morning, saying she was going to the hospital, went straight to him. Grandma didn't tell me the details of that conversation, Clara recalled. She only said that nothing came of it. David and Sarah categorically refused even to meet me. And then they moved to Moscow altogether. Of course, you can understand them. They will have had to not only take a disabled girl into their home, but also reveal the truth to you. My parents told me a completely different story, Eleanor said. Something about them demanding money for silence, threatening to tell me who I really was. That's very unlike Grandma Linda. Clara shook her head. But I can assume she was desperate. And that's why she talked to your parents like that. She needed to secure my future at any cost. Maybe she went too far. It's such a shame that Mom and Dad got scared then. Eleanor frowned slightly. They're generally very kind, attentive, and caring people. And they were probably afraid of my reaction to the truth, protecting me. Because of that, we lost so much time with you. We'll make up for it now, Clara smiled. You'll come visit me, won't you? We'll communicate in reality now, not just in dreams. In connection with this, I have an idea, Michael intervened. Clara, have you ever thought about moving to the city? No, the woman replied. Where would I live there? Let's say there's housing. Would you move? There's housing. Eleanor picked up. Michael, do you mean... Yes, my grandmother's apartment, Michael explained. She can't live alone anymore, and she doesn't want to move in with my parents. She needs someone who would give her medication on time, cook for her. We haven't been able to find a caregiver like that. She doesn't like anyone. She says they're strangers, unfamiliar. She's afraid of them. And you're as much family as can be. What do you think about this? Can you handle it? We'll pay you a good salary. Say yes, Eleanor persuaded. Michael's grandmother lives in the next building. She's very sweet, and you'll get along. And she definitely won't be afraid of you when she finds out you're my sister. What is there to think about? Nothing keeps me here at all. Of course, I agree. Super, Michael smiled. Eleanor hugged her sister without a word. It was a warm August evening. An unusual company, attracting everyone's attention, moved along the wide street. Two absolutely identical young, beautiful women in stylish sky blue sundresses. One of them in a wheelchair, and two identical little girls in bright dresses. The little ones were animatedly talking to both women. The sisters had ice cream in their hands. And I kept wondering where I suddenly got twins. Eleanor chuckled. Turns out, I'm a twin myself. I look at my beloved nieces and think that you and I could have been just as happy in childhood, Clara said. I missed you very much. Me too, but the main thing is everything is good now. Everything truly was good now.